All right, welcome to the second screencast for Chapter 1 here. Now we're going to start talking about the 5 foundations of economics. And in this screencast, we're going to be talking about incentives. And it's a common phrase you'll hear economists say is that incentives matter, that our incentive to do something or a disincentive to not do something really does matter for whether or not people do things, all right? So what are incentives? Well, incentives are just the factors that motivate you to do something or to exert some sort of effort, all right? So people respond to incentives. Incentives are everywhere, and financial gain often plays a prominent role in people's incentives to do things, all right? There are positive incentives and negative incentives. So examples of positive incentives are tax refunds, a pay raise, winning Employee of the Month awards, stickers, smiley faces, extra credit. You guys respond to the extra credit and to the bonus points that I have in class. Those are all forms of positive incentives. What are negative incentives? Well, negative incentives are taxes, jail, fees, fines, spankings, getting grounded, getting fired, failing the class. These are all examples of negative sorts of incentives, all right? There are also direct and indirect incentives. So you could have positive direct incentives or negative direct incentives. You could have positive indirect incentives and positive and negative indirect incentives. But what are direct incentives? So these are really easy to recognize, right? I will pay you $40 to do some yard work. If you get straight A's, you get $500, all right? There are also indirect incentives. So let's take this last thing I mentioned here, giving a child $500 if they get straight A's, all right? Well, what are some of the indirect incentives that direct incentive causes, all right? Well, maybe the child now has an incentive to cheat. If at the margin they don't think they're going to make it, maybe they'll now cheat so that they can get the $500. You've now made getting a bigger deal to the child, so you're not always sure that the actions they're going to take will be the ones you wanted in order to get the A. Another indirect incentive would be that maybe they don't get involved in extracurricular activities and instead just focus on their grades. Maybe you didn't intend for that to be the case, but the child may substitute out of the less rewarded activity if they really do value the $500 more, all right? So part of this idea of indirect incentives are something called unintended consequences. And economists love unintended consequences. It's like the mother's milk of econ. I don't know how many people get into economics because they love the idea that when someone tries to get someone to do something, there's some unintended consequence, especially if it's a government program or a business trying to incentivize people to do things and there's bad consequences on the side. Economists, we love that because we feel like we kind of see things better than most of the world. I'm not sure that that's sure, but there is a lot of thinking through unintended consequences in economics. What is an unintended consequence? Well, it's an unplanned result. Usually it's negative and unwanted because of an incentive that you gave someone. So one example is a social safety net. Most people agree that there should be some sort of social safety net. We could argue about how much it should be and what form it should take. But most people think, yeah, we should have a social safety net for people who fall on bad luck or maybe mentally or cognitively cannot take care of themselves. But if you have a social safety net, that does give people a disincentive to work. So what you have to do is you have to think about how you design the system. So you can just imagine if you're a low-skilled worker and you're out of work, you have 2 choices in this hypothetical scenario. We as economists love what we call thought experiments or hypothetical scenarios because it helps us to they're like little mini mathematical models without all the math. It's just kind of a logic model that helps us get at things. And this is an example. So let's say you're low skilled and you're out of work and you could get a full-time job at low wages though, $400 a week, all right? Or you could remain on welfare and get $450 per week. Welfare here I'm just using as all the government assistance you might get, all right? Now, if this was your choice, what would you choose to do? Well, option 2 is clearly better from just the monetary outcome point of view, all right? And it's not that this person would even be necessarily lazy. They're just intelligently picking what is the best given the incentives in place. All right, that indirect incentive to stay on the social welfare program. All right. So how do you solve these sorts of problems? Well, you have to think through when you put programs and policies in place, be you government or be you a firm or be it within your own household, what might be some of the unintended consequences. And if they arise, then you have to modify things to fix it. So one of the things that's done with social welfare programs is we try to subsidize low-skilled workers actually working. So this is called the Earned Income Tax Credit. It's also known in economic circles as the negative income tax. And it was pioneered by, of all people, Milton Friedman. He was kind of the father of the Earned Income Tax Credit. The idea, again, is that instead of making people choose between help and working, you say, well, if you work but you make very little, we'll actually give you a little more. Again, the idea is to incentivize people to work. Right? Another example of unintended consequences is child safety seats. And so there's no bullet points for this. It's just a story I'm going to tell you. But there have been several times over the past 20, 25 years where there have been small accidents on runways or with planes hitting turbulence where infants who sit in their parents' laps, if you're an infant under the age of 2, your parent can just hold you. They don't have to buy another ticket for you. All right? And so there have been several incidents where everybody else on the plane was fine, but infants have been hurt or sometimes even killed because, when you're holding the child, the force of some sort of impact pulls the child out of your hands. And so each time there's usually a call of some sort to have infants in airplane seats, like car seats, right? To strap them in, make the parent buy a ticket, put the child in the seat. Whenever this happens, inevitably, economists will write letters, they'll do screencasts, they'll write op-eds, they'll write policy pieces saying, you have to think through this, because what is the unintended consequence of requiring a parent to buy a seat for a child under 2? All right. Well, it's not just the extra cost of the safety seat, it's the extra cost of that ticket, right? And so some parents who were just at deciding whether they were going to fly or drive, and they decided to fly, well, now you've maybe doubled the price of the ticket. If it's just the parent and child, now you have to buy 2 tickets, right? Well, doubling the price of a trip might cause people to substitute into driving. And even with all the child safety seats and seat belts and all the safety stuff in automobiles, a trip of the same distance is far more dangerous in a car. You're far more likely to be injured or killed. So what economists say when this arises is that all you're going to do is cause people to substitute away from air travel that is safe into car travel, which is dangerous, and you're going to end up harming kids. And there was an estimate done by the FAA at one point that it might lead to as many as 72 deaths of children a year. And there's not nearly that many deaths of children per year from incidents in airplanes. All right, and if I can find the citation for that study, I'm in the ballpark. It's something around 72. I'll try to put a link here when I upload this to YouTube. If not, ask me about it, and I'll try to post it for you on Canvas. All right. What are other ways that incentives matter? Well, incentives can also spur innovation. So patents and copyrights are different forms of intellectual property protection. A patent is, well, when you invent the iPhone, or you invent the paperclip, or you invent some sort of widget of some sort. You can patent it, meaning that you are the only person who can build that invention for a set number of years. Patents can be 13 or 17, depending on the different category. Meaning you have a monopoly, you're the only person who can sell that, right? Copyrights are usually for artistic work or for other forms of things that you write or create, not an invention per se. And a copyright is, I think, something like 70 years after the death of the author. They keep changing it and extending it. Disney pours a lot of money into lobbying Congress to keep having the copyright extended because they don't want Mickey Mouse to fall in the public domain, which is when something is no longer copyrightable. But why do we allow these sorts of monopolies? Well, the idea is that it gives people incentives to innovate and create. If you work hard, you bear the cost of innovating and doing the research and trying new things, then you've got to have some time before someone can just immediately copy you, all right? So the idea is to give, with patents, the idea is to give people enough time to recoup a reasonable amount of profits from their invention, but then eventually we want society as a whole to benefit from the invention of the staple or the paperclip or things like that, all right? So what is the result of a strong patent system? Well, you get more innovation because people are rewarded for new popular innovations. Innovation spurs economic growth and gives you higher standards of living, all right? So for example, in the pharmaceutical area, we have very strong patent protections in the US, and we get lots and lots and millions of dollars poured into research and development to find new drugs. Now, we don't always get the drugs that maybe we think that socially we would want, because different types of diseases have different demand for new types of drugs. But we do get a lot of trial and error and millions of dollars in scientific research done for pharmaceuticals. There can be also downsides of strong patent systems. In the software industry, high-tech industry right now, there are so many patents on so many things that it really seems to be stifling innovation. A lot of people are arguing that different companies get strategic patents and they try to sue each other. Right now, Apple and Samsung, of course, are in a multi-year thing over the iPhone where they're suing each other for infringing on each other's patents. And usually these are used strategically, and an increasing number of tech writers are saying that maybe this isn't the best system. Maybe we need to come up with something different for software, because it's not exactly like inventing a machine whole cloth, because people are patenting things like when you pull down on the iPhone and it bounces, that's patented, right? So that can cause a stifling of innovation. So there are downsides to it also, all right? And what I want to leave you with is an interview with Roland Fryer, a social scientist, on the Colbert Report, who is talking about his study in which they actually paid children for grades. So I hope you'll enjoy that, and I'll see you next time.